Got another Android box in to test today. It's the T95Z Max, and this was sent in via Gearbest for a review. Now quickly, with some of the specifications on screen, this is basically the same as the T95Z Plus that I looked at a couple of years ago. Same graphics, same 8-core processor, so it's really a variation on that, but we're going to go through and have a look. These are your connections on the back. We've got the power input, HDMI, audio out, and 2 USB 2 ports and a micro SD card. Nothing else on the other surfaces. It has a glossy finish, but they did do a sort of brushed metal effect on the top. If you flip it over now, you'll see that there are strangely no silicone pads. It's not really a problem, but they just didn't include any on this, and the included user guide is just a generic one. There's nothing specific to this model. Now the remote, we've seen this before, has just changed the shade of blue. That's the only difference I can see. It's a bit lighter. Plenty of Android boxes with this, but at least it does have the programmable buttons for the TV at the top, so you can mirror the functions of your TV remote. Now this takes the standard 2 AAA cells. Obviously these aren't included. It's really nothing special as a remote goes. The only advantage there is the programmable buttons. And this is the power supply. It runs at 5 volts. I have the UK version. Also get your HDMI cable. Length of this is just over 1 meter. So we'll boot up the box now. Fortunately the display isn't annoying, it's quite well diffused, and we go through the standard animation that we get. Basically the same as the T95Z Plus, except they've just changed that to the Max at the end, and the layout is the same as well. Very familiar. I don't mind it myself, it works okay. It's quite basic and straightforward to follow. You will notice the number of apps are included, just the basic stuff. You do have Netflix and a couple of other apps, but there isn't that much. They've put Firefox in there for the browser, and just like the other boxes, you can go in and customize which apps you want to show up. So for example, the music, I can add the media center, just so you can tweak it to your own personal taste, and the same for the video and the bar at the bottom along there, the shortcuts. Now we do have the navigation bar, which was been quite useful on the Android boxes that I've looked at, but unfortunately with this particular one suffers from the same as the previous Android boxes that I've looked at, in that you dismiss it, that you can't bring it back. So you have to reboot the box to get the navigation bar back, which is a bit disappointing, to be honest. Because this is running a newer version of Android, you can go into the settings and it pulls out the side panel, so you're not dumped into a separate settings menu, and then you can go through and make any adjustments that you need. So it means that you can change the settings quite quickly on this box. And this one is available with 16 or 32 gig. I have the 32 gig version, and you've about 25 available for use. Now on this I did check for some updates, but unfortunately at the minute I can't see any available. I tried both different methods of checking for that. Now on the Bluetooth connection, I found it a bit slow, to be honest, and not every device that I had would pair up. So that's something to bear in mind. I think there's a couple of bugs that the maker could work out on this particular model, so hopefully there'll be some updates coming down the road. If they could fix those issues, would be useful. Some of the devices connected, and but the ones that did, it took a couple of minutes sometimes to connect to them. This is just the updates that I talked about earlier, so I couldn't see any and I tried both. Doesn't mean that there won't be any updates available. It's really difficult to tell with these Android boxes, because sometimes they get them and sometimes they just don't. So hopefully there will be something down the road which might improve it. As far as Cody goes, it's just the basic installation. There's no extra streams added, so you will have to configure that yourself. Quite a few guides out there to do that. You can just got the add-ons here, which shows the apps are installed. Some people like a clean installation, and this box pretty much is. Not very many apps included in it. Now I did test out the Mirrorcast, and that is quite a useful feature. It will bring up the confirmation, so you can accept that from a phone or a tablet. I've got a Xiaomi phone here I've just connected up to, and it's quite quick. Didn't have too much lag on this, but it does depend on the distance that you are away from the box. So I was a couple of meters away, so fairly close, but still it worked well, and I think most people will find it quite useful. I'm just scrolling down through some of the YouTube videos on trending. Now I'm going to run through some of my benchmarks. This is the Bonsai test, just gives you an idea of the 3D performance, as this is using the 8-core S912 chipset that has performed quite well in the past, definitely better than the quad cores. So for something like this, it's worth running the test, and we get a score just under the 30 frames per second, so not quite as fast as the T95Z Plus, but it's close enough. The other reason I run these tests is for another reason, is just to test the stability of the box. I also leave them on for 24 hours, make sure there's no problems. Now you can also go into the settings here, which give you the normal look that you get on a phone or a tablet. Honestly, you're not that likely to need to go in there, but if you go into the Droid Settings, that brings out another side panel, and this gives you a few options that aren't available in your normal settings, mainly the display. You also have CEC control on this for the HDMI. That is quite a useful feature to have, and there's a few playback settings as well. So that's something which you might want to tweak around with. You can set the box to shut itself down completely rather than go in standby, and I tend to do that with these boxes, so they do a full shutdown. Once you go into the more settings, that will just take you back into the normal screen. So CPU Z now, just to cover some of the details, and the box is rooted, so you have root access on that, which could be something that some people do look for on the Android boxes. And it also wasn't getting that hot either, a bit cooler than some of the boxes when I've been benchmarking it. As far as the Wi-Fi test goes, speeds were above average. I usually test this off peak so I can get the best speed, and it's the same location for all of the boxes, so I was getting pretty good speeds on the Wi-Fi tests. Definitely quite happy with that. Also, you won't have any problems with 4K playback. Most of the files that I played playback without issue. You might come across the odd one rogue file out there that you might not be able to play back. You might need to download an extra app, but the playback was pretty solid. And just running Antutu, the test on that, just to give you an idea of the performance again for 3D. This is quite demanding, hence it runs at quite a slow frame rate, and the score on this was just under the 50,000, so decent enough performance. You won't have problems running fairly demanding games on this. Now Geekbench 4 is the test that I run for the processor, and we've got a score just over 2,300, 2348, which was a bit quicker than the Plus version. The other benchmarks that I ran, I've put them on the screen. There's some of the results there. So YouTube will play back in full HD, but Netflix Prime, you'll need to go something like a Mi box to get those in HD. Now there should be some newer chipsets coming out, the S912. Reason I've not been looking at that many Android boxes is because they haven't really changed much in terms of the hardware. I've been getting a few in for review, but they're very similar in terms of hardware. It's really just a case of minor bugs. Perhaps they've used different launchers, etc. So with this particular box, it's a decent box in most ways. Really just those couple of issues that I have with the Bluetooth connection, which could be better, and I also felt the navigation bar is a silly little bug which should have been looked at by now. So I'm hoping that they can get fixed over time. Also, they haven't really done anything compared to the T95Z Plus, but the performance is solid on this box, particularly if you're a more demanding user and you need that multitasking ability. You can't really complain about it in that, and it's also a decent choice if you do a bit of gaming. The 3D performance is quite a bit better than a lot of the quad-core boxes. This box is pretty much the same as the T95Z Plus, just a different case design, and you don't have the funky colours. It's also got that same navigation bar bug which I saw on the original version when I looked at that. So look around for the best price on this. I do see them on specials, but if you're someone that's a bit more demanding in terms of 3D performance and multitasking, it's a decent step up from the quad-core boxes that are around today.